same as anybody else, I've also fallen into the trap. I've got a load of models I need to paint, especially if I've got a tabletop, like a Warhammer game, for example, coming up, and I want some stuff ready for that. So yeah, I'll be sitting in front of the TV and painting away. Am I painting them to the best of my ability? No. Am I paying that much attention? No. So what if I took a basic troop model and gave it my entire attention? How would it turn out? But also, what would I learn from that process as well? I don't know yet. Let's find out. Now, I've been looking forward to painting some of the Beast Snagga boys, and you may have seen a video I did recently about building it and getting it ready to paint. So I thought, okay, let's try it out. Let's try and paint this model as mindfully as possible, giving it my full attention, and what can I learn from that process? And will that help me become a better painter in the future? So before I start planning the paint scheme, please remember, if you're getting value from this, please bash the like button, and also drop down in the comments what you liked about it. Okay, so planning the paint scheme for this, I normally work from the deepest part outwards. So what I mean is I look at the deepest, the recessed part, and then start from that part and work out to the most outer part of the model. So on this model, he's got several wounds all over him. Now, if I try and do a scar tissue, it's not going to show up very well. So I think I'll do them more fresher, so more a red wound rather than kind of a scarring wound. Once I've done that, I'll then start working on the skin, because there's quite a lot of skin on these models, and then start working on the accessories as I work my way out. The first things first, I'm going to drop a brighter red, just quite roughly, over these wound sites. So I can see where they are, but also it gives that base colour I want in the depth of the wound. Okay, now for the skin. I tend to use a wet blend / loaded brush technique for doing orc skin. So I load the brush up, and then I use that to create the volumes and the highlights on the model. Now, because the paint is thicker in Citadel paint than, say, something like a Vallejo model air range, it can be really useful to take advantage of that surface tension and not water it down, and then use it for spot detail like the eyes. So you can use a really sharp tip brush and just dab it exactly where you want it to be, and the paint will stay there, it won't flow out anywhere. Then using a black, not exactly a wash, but slightly thicker than a wash, but it still flows a little bit, to then just almost give like a black eyeline underneath the eye. Okay, so I want the hide on the back to be a graduated red, so I'm going to put a base layer of Vallejo hull red. Now, as you may have seen before in previous videos, this is quite translucent, so it'll show through some of the highlights and the black priming that I put in on the first stages. So once that is dry, I then go over the top of that with the Vallejo Fire Red. So as it's part of the Vallejo model air range, it's still comparatively translucent. You'll still see some of the colour from the whole red, as well as the priming tones coming through as well. For some of the leather work, I'll start off with a darker brown, and then put in texture and some of the highlights using a stippling technique and a kind of edge highlighting technique with a lighter, more chocolatey brown. And then for some of the highlights, I then add a bit more beige into the mix to add that contrast in. So what I've started doing is doing almost like a sand combat fatigue type coloration. So I'm using like a beige and then the brown to a similar loaded brush technique as I used for the skin, but I'm now doing that for these trousers and trying to put in some texture, but also some of the folds in the fabric and the shadows as well. So for a shoulder pad, I have painted it black, and on a shoulder pad I want to put a checkerboard effect. So I'm going to use a dark grey first of all and just sketch out where I want the lines to be and fill that in really gradually. Because this guy's going to be based in a desert, I want it to be quite a warm white rather than a cold white. So I'm going to use beige to fill in the white parts of the checker box here. And also I'm going to use, to try and keep in theme with the Bad Batch theme for the Snagga Boys shoulder pads, which I went into more detail about in the Smash a Squig video. So I want to try and make it quite stripy. I want to make it look rough. So I'm going to use the brush strokes in the same direction and not be too neat with it. And just also put a little bit of pressure on the brush, because that then makes the tip of the brush splay out a little bit, and it gives that kind of rough edge to the top end of the box. So whilst they can be quite thin, I do like the Vallejo Model Air metallic range, and just using the metallic black to block in the metal work on the slugger. Now what often people do is they will paint something metallic and then forget about it. Now the reflections and stuff, the highlights won't work properly, so therefore I'll use a gunmetal slightly dark silver colour to then put the highlights where I want them to be on the metallic pieces. Now if you paint the things like the choppers and stuff all the same colour, it can look a bit samey and a bit boring, especially if they're all the same in a big mob. So I'm going to make some parts as black, some part with metallic, but I want this part here to be kind of a rusty kind of colour. So I'll paint it with a dark brown first of all, and then kind of stipple over a different sort of lighter brown and like an orangey brown to try and make it look a bit different, but also to try and give that look of a rusted metal effect. So especially on this sort of model where the kit is not going to be pristine, you then use other colours, other washes like the rust, for example, to add a bit of variation, add a bit of difference into the metal work as well, and just add a bit of interest in. Also, if I then put the rust over the checker box as well, I have used things like the Stuke and Grind before to make it look a bit tarnished and yucky, but I actually quite like the different tones coming and different colours coming through if you then use the rust wash over the checker box. You can also go over it again and make this colour stronger in certain places if you want to. Right, onto the base. Now because this is a basic troop, I'm going to have loads of these, I don't want to make it go too over the top even though I'm paying attention on this one. I want it to be able to fit in with the rest of the squad. So I'm going to use my standard routine on this one. So first of all, I'm going to use Humbrol model filler to give a texture to the base. And once that's dried, I then use a craft knife to carefully scrape away any excess filler that's got on the edges of the base. I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to paint it with a dark brown and then dry brush over with a sand coloured paint. Then once I've done that, I'm going to add some different colour variation and some highlights and stuff in using the Tamiya Weathering Master set. Okay, so what did I learn from this? Well, especially when you're doing batch painting, it's easy to fall into block colours and you're not looking at the volumes, you're not looking at the shapes, and you end up just blocking in colour. I think one of the things that really intrigued me with this project was how much detail can I get in here? So on a bust, for example, you've got a big surface and you can fit a lot in, from textures and lighting and all sorts of things. But on a much smaller scale, what can you do? How much detail can you get into the face of one of these orcs, for example? And at the minute, my skill level is not good enough for that. But can it be? I think I might try that out. That could be an interesting experiment. I think the biggest thing I learned from this, though, was that even though it's a basic model, if I give it the time and the headspace and the attention, I end up with a model I'm really pleased with. But also, I really enjoyed the process as well. So yeah, maybe sometimes we do need to slow down and enjoy the process of painting, even if you have hundreds of them to do. I'm going to see if I can apply that to the next project, and I'll see you then.